Welcome to Compass. Our mission is navigating people to God. So glad that you're here. I want to welcome those of you watching online, especially Carl and Rebecca in Paris, France, watching. I'm sure it's evening time there now. We're so glad that you're watching. I want to welcome all of our online community that are watching today. And we're in a series called Parental Guidance Required. It's our last weekend of the series. We want to encourage all of you parents to come today at 4:30. Whatever you're planning to do, okay, you're going to watch college basketball, whatever you're doing, invest 2 hours into our parenting seminar, if you would, 4:30 today. We'd love to have you. Go to mycompasschurch.com/parenting, or just walk in and tell them you want to register. We'd love to have you. You can walk in and then walk out 2 hours later, a better mom, a better dad. I want to encourage you to be there. And we are finishing up this series today, and assisting me today is the best parent I know, my wife of 32 years, Michelle, and you're gonna be hearing from her in just a few moments. You can clap, it's fine. And the two of us want to start with a disclaimer. There's no such thing as perfect parents, right? There's no such thing. Yours weren't perfect, mine weren't perfect. Michelle and I are not perfect parents, not even close. We can't really be perfect parents, but we can be better parents, amen? And that's why we're doing this series, and nothing determines the trajectory of our children in life. Nothing so determines their view of life, their odds for success relationally, as their parents. And second would be their relationship with people outside the home. We're going to talk about both of those. A huge amount of influence can come from those two relationships. And last week we talked about the fact that our kids' relationship with God is the most crucial of the three. And Chris Gabbard spoke. If you didn't hear Chris's message, it was amazing, right? And you need to go to mycompasschurch.com this week and rewatch that if you didn't hear it. And today we discuss, again, the second and third most crucial relationships, the relationship with parents and relationship with other people. And the parent-child relationship is actually the hinge for opening relational doors with God and with others. That's why this is so important. And we discuss the need to sort of buck the trend that make our kids experience rich and relationship poor. We do not want to find ourselves at the end of our parenting life relationship poor, okay? We don't want to do that. And Michelle and I have kind of two thoughts in terms of helping you enhance your relationship with your kids. And the first one is this: when it matters the most, the quality of your relationship with your kids will determine the weight of your influence. The quality of your relationship, you and your kids, will determine the weight of your influence. Not the size of your bank account, not the insane vacation experiences, and those are fun, they make great memories. But the quality of your relationship will determine the weight of your influence. You think about your relationship with your parents right now. You think about maybe you had no relationship with your father growing up, and maybe he left when you were young, and he was unfaithful. And in fact, a day like Father's Day to this day is really hard for you. If suddenly he called you up and started to give you parenting advice, would you listen to him? Probably not, right? Because you had no relationship. He had no influence in your life. Or maybe it's the flip situation. You talk to your mom every day. You text with mom. You get advice. She was a great mom. She still is a great mom. And you want to be like her. And you listen to her when she gives you advice. The weight of her influence is huge. You see what I'm talking about? And that's the way it's going to be with you. It'll be one scenario or the other. And here's the truth. We always want to be sitting in the seat of influence with our children. You and I, as parents, we want to sit in the seat of influence with our kids. It's really, really important. And here's why it's important. And this is why some of you have lost your influence and you don't even realize it. When your kids first came into the world, your influence didn't hinge on your relationship with them because they were babies. Babies are not looking for a relationship, right? They're looking for a food, shelter, a place to sleep, and somebody to change their diapers. Amen? Right? That's what they're looking for. And we were these giant people that seemed to love for them and care for them. And it wasn't about relationship when they were babies. It was about size and position. We strapped them in, we buckled them in, we tucked them in, we made them eat food. We had size and position. I'm dad and I'm bigger than you. I'm mom and I'm bigger than you. And eventually that goes away. And someday it won't be about size and position anymore. My mother turned 78 years old yesterday. She couldn't pick me up and put me in the back seat of her car if her life depended on it, right? Now I could pick her up and put her in the back seat of my car, right? Because size and position went away a long time ago. But my mom still has incredible influence over my life because we have a great relationship. I care about what she thinks. In our parenting world, if we don't shift from size and position to influence by relationship, we're going to be in huge, huge trouble, because some of you are still trying to use size and position over your 15-year-old and your 16-year-old, and it's not going to work. In fact, it's going to fail miserably. And some parents actually believe that if they have the right set of rules and the proper threat of punishment and the right way to enforce, that they're going to be okay. That they'll try and shape and control and regulate the behavior of their children. And they fall back on threats and manipulation and guilt. And they reduce parenting to be lawgiver and judge and jury. But we've learned that rules without relationship absolutely leads to rebellion. It won't work. And some of you want to push that size and position button long after it's effective. And the tragedy is it normally comes at a time when your kids need our influence the most. They have it the least. Your kids need you most when it matters the most, when they're choosing who to date and when they're determining how far is too far, when they're choosing a university, when they're choosing who to marry. And when they do all this, size and position are completely irrelevant. It's about the health and depth of the relationship. And sometimes when we enforce size and discipline, size and position, what we do is we exasperate our kids. We wear them out. Ephesians 6 says this: fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. So to exasperate means you've abused the position. You've abused your size and getting what you want from your children. And in doing so, you've angered them and you've exasperated them. It's kind of like bully parenting. Okay, you're bigger and you can get your way. And even when you're wrong, you end up being right. And you're right when you project your correctness in such a way as to frustrate your kids. And what you're really doing is you're setting your kids up to fail. You exasperate them. They can't win. There's no way to win that. And if you can't remember what that's like, just remember what goes on in your world, in your life. I mean, do you enjoy being around a person who's always telling you your faults? Do you enjoy being around a person who always has to have the last word? A person who speaks sarcasm as their primary language? You can never win an argument with that kind of person. We don't enjoy that, so stop being that kind of parent. Now, I'm not telling you to not discipline your kids, and I'm not telling you to never say no. In fact, a good no is real important in the life of a child. The development of a strong no is very important to the growth of a young human being, because the day is going to come where they're going to need to learn how to say a real strong no. When somebody offers them drugs or alcohol, when an older boyfriend starts pressuring his teenage girlfriend, when they first get a job and somebody tries to get them to cut ethical corners, when somebody else wants to dominate or manipulate them. All through life, your kids and mine are going to need a real strong no. So when they're real little, we have to develop that in them. And some of you are here today and you finished the in-home portion of parenting. That's where Michelle and I are right now. We finished the in-home portion of parenting. And it's really easy to look back and say, and listen to some of the stuff we're talking about and say, man, we really blew it, but it's too late to do something about it. It is not too late to do something about that. The lie from hell is that it's too late. But it doesn't matter if your child is 24 or 44 or 64, he or she would be deeply moved if you would sit down and say, listen, I'm sorry. I didn't know how much feelings matter. I didn't have anybody authenticate my feelings when I was a kid. And I just didn't know. I didn't know how to deal with your feelings, and I did the best I could. But now, maybe the approach that I took, I see that it hurt you and it short-circuited you, and I'm sorry. I need a do-over. That would heal 1,000 wounds right there. You might gain back some influence. You could actually dial yourself back into their life. Michelle and I have always loved Colossians 3 when it comes to parenting. Since God chose you to be the holy people that he loves, you must clothe yourself. Look at the language. Clothe yourself with tenderhearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. When he says clothe yourself, that's what your children should see. Make allowances for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you. You must forgive others. And so that includes your kids. Because when it matters the most, the quality of your relationship with your kids will determine the weight of your influence. Michelle's going to come up and give our second one.
So in talking about the weight of your influence, I want to focus in and just say this. The weight of your influence will determine future relationships for your children. You have the capacity to forever impact your child's relationships, who they date, who they marry, how they raise their kids, who they work with, what they say about you when they're out of the house, which completely terrifies me because mine are not in the house anymore, so I don't know what they're saying about me. But I want to give you a few thoughts on connecting relationally with your kids. And this first one may surprise you, and you may say it has nothing to do with parenting, and it really has everything to do with parenting. First is I want you to think about loving your spouse deeply. Date your spouse. Have a scheduled date night, and the kids may say, "Mommy, can we go?" And you say, "No, you cannot, because I've got a date with your dad and you are not invited." So make time with your spouse. Stop being kid worshipers. Stop being helicopter parents. As Drew's mentioned before, we've always tried to find other people that we could look up to. And early on, one of those couples for us was, they're named Dale and Karen Penn. And they were a part of our church in California when we lived there. And they were somebody that we looked up to in so many ways. And they have 5 kids, but they have 5 kids. There was always something going on in their house. But they worked to keep their marriage first priority. And they did this by every evening when they would come home from work, Dale and Karen would sit on the couch together for 15 minutes. And that was mommy and daddy time. They reconnected, they talked about the day, they just had a few minutes of time for the 2 of them. And unless the house was on fire or someone was bleeding, the kids knew not to bother them. They had to leave them alone because they knew it was better for all of them if mom and dad had that time together before the crazy evening of all the activities and homework. They modeled a healthy relationship for their kids. And we all struggle with this. We have struggled with this. We've not always been perfect, but you've got to work hard at keeping that marriage relationship in its proper place. We've been married for almost 32 years, and we have had a getaway or vacation away from our kids every year of marriage. It doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. Most of the time, it was not, but we made the time and the effort. And our kids have had worries over the years, just like everyone's kids do. They've worried about academics, they've worried about athletics, whatever that is. But they've never had to worry or doubt about whether mom loved dad or dad loves mom. Model that for them. They have a lot of worries. Don't add to that. They can see you connecting relationally by you show them what a healthy love relationship is like, and so you're leading by example. The second thing I want to talk about is you need to discover the differences in your kids and invest in each of them. Psalm 139:13 and 14 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well." We often read that verse when we're talking about the sanctity of life, and that's really good. But it's really talking about the fact that God made each of us to be unique and His creation. We are all knit together differently. So spend time with each individual kid and learn to celebrate their differences. All of our kids were different growing up. If I would have said to them, "We're going to a party," Hannah, our daughter, would have said, "A party, how fun, I'm gonna go get ready." Landon, our middle son, might have said, "Well, what are we eating at this party? And how big is the TV? And who's gonna be there?" And so if everything was right, he would be in attendance and he would be happy about it. Luke, he's got a few more questions. He said, "A party, what kind of party? Do I have to go? Can I wear shorts? How long will it last?" We had lots of questions. He would still go and he'd have a good time, but he had to think about it more. They're just wired differently and they think differently. And truly, it makes it a whole lot more fun. It would be boring if we were all the same, and families have to understand this. I'm telling you, planning a vacation in our home was like a bad one-act play. We could not agree. It was going to the beach, it was the mountains, it was roller coasters, it was low adventure. They were all different. So understand their different needs. Don't try to rewire them, because remember, God's the one that wired them the way they are. Drew said the first week of this series that comparison is the poison pill of parenting. Don't play that game with your kids. You know, we often talk about dads dating daughters, and that's so important, and I want to encourage you dads to do that. But moms of boys, I want to talk to you for just a second. You need to find a way to connect with your sons. That's huge. They need you. I cannot tell you how many video games I've played, basketball games I've been a part of. I once went hunting in my Lululemon pants, and I'm just telling you, that's not my thing. I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I'm on video games and I'm moving this little thing and I die and we start over. That's all I got. But I want to tell you that that's huge because I know that I have to invest in their life. I have to spend time with them. Make memories with your kids. And now you're going, wait a minute, I'm confused. You've all talked about not being too much on experiences. And we have talked about not being experience rich and relationship poor, but we never said it was good to be experience void. Just don't make it the first and only thing you provide. I also want to talk to you about encouraging your kids liberally. Build them up, don't tear them down. Kids need to feel accepted into your family. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." They need to know that you're in their corner. So catch them in the act of doing something good occasionally. Encourage them liberally, because the lack of praise can be so damaging. You know, kids grow up a little bit and you hear parents speak about their own children in ways that it's kind of sad. It's almost like you've disowned them. You're like, well, Mike here, he's our difficult one. And Danny, well, he's just not an athlete like his brothers. And oh my gosh, we don't even know where we got Sarah. Sometimes we wonder if she's not adopted. And often these words are said in a jesting tone, but the message is real clear. This child is a disappointment. This child doesn't make my eyes shine. This child doesn't make me feel a winner. And can I just gently say, it is not your kid's job to make you feel like a winner. Parents, you need to express encouragement and appreciation on a regular basis. Study your kids carefully. Find out their love language and tell them that you love them. If it's awkward and you're not real good at it, do it anyway. If you didn't get much of that when you were growing up and that's a source of pain for you, tell them anyway. And if sometimes they don't tell you back, you tell them anyway. It's not about getting your children to make you feel loved. You are the parent. It's not your child's job to fill up, it's not their job to fill up your neediness. You're going to have to find that somewhere else. But it is your job to build up their hearts. Kids have to feel accepted, and encouragement is the key to that. We talked last week about the importance of this. We need to connect with our kids spiritually. Chris did such a great job with this last week, and because it's so important. There's a recent study that's shown that a child may spend 3,000 hours a year with their parents, 1,000 hours a year with others. So coaches, friends, teachers, people like that, and only 52 hours at the church. This is really astounding.
So think about this for a second, if you will. Think about these three containers, and each one of these colored balls would represent 50 hours of influence. 50 hours. So you think about 50 hours of influence. Let's say your student, maybe your junior high student or your high school student would come and be a part of our student ministries, which I think would be a really valuable experience for them. And I really believe in our youth ministers and our coaches. And so if they would come once a week and spend an hour in youth group, okay? So this would represent them doing that. They were faithful. They were here every week except maybe Christmas and spring break. But this one ball would represent about 50 hours of influence that we would have over your kids. These 20 would represent about 1,000 hours of influence that a coach or a teacher or a friend would have over your child. And these 60 would represent 3,000 hours in a year that you would have time to influence your kids. So you understand the folly of someone saying to us, hey, make my high school kid a spiritual giant, right? And the reality is we have this amount of influence over their life. And the teachers and friends and others have this amount of influence over their life. And you have this amount of influence over their life. And so the onus is on us as parents to be the spiritual leaders in our home. Because we just wanted to show you this to kind of give you an example of, we're going to do our very best here at Compass with your students. But the amount of influence that you have over them is a huge, huge weight. And so we want to encourage you with that today.
I really love this visual because I'm a visual learner. That's the way, so this is really good for me. But so you have massive influence. The relationship that you have with your kids today will determine the weight of your influence tomorrow. Okay, I've got one more thing that I want to talk about, and I want to spend a little bit more time on this because it's huge. And that's helping your kids dial in the right friends. Here's the truth. You may have a great relationship with your child, and your child may have a fantastic relationship with God, but there's that one more dial in your child's life that has the power to change both of those things, and that's their friends. Never underestimate the power of friends in your child's life. They have immense power, and in different seasons, they have more power than any other relationship. So choosing friends is very critical. Drew said 2 weeks ago, show me your friends, and I will show you your future. So I need you to ask yourself, what kind of company do your kids keep? Are you familiar with their friends? Do you know them? Do you know their parents? Often the greatest successes and the biggest regrets of our lives are attributed to friends, and it can go either way. Proverbs 13:20 says, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Let me break that down, and I want to start with the positive part of that. Walk with the wise and become wise. Some of the greatest decisions that are ever made, and some of the greatest discoveries, and some of the greatest growth periods in our life were because the right people were in our life at the right time. I believe in the principle, walk with the wise and become wise. Who doesn't want that for their kids? And in a parenting context, this is so critical as our kids get older. There's an old Yiddish proverb that says, little children, little joys, bigger children, bigger sorrows. And it's true. There's so much more at stake. Things begin to change. Parenting older teens and adult kids can be hard. Their problems are bigger. So what happens is there's a little girl, and she held her daddy's hand proudly on the way to kindergarten. So now then she transitions into the middle schooler who doesn't want to be seen with them on, Saturday night at the movie theater. And there's the 7-year-old boy who proudly kisses his mom every morning as he goes off to kindergarten, but he transitions into this high schooler who's embarrassed to even hug her in public. He doesn't even want to acknowledge her. It's the same kids, but they have different hearts. And I'm telling you, it's hard to come to grips with, but as a parent, your cool factor is going to evaporate. I hate to tell you that. You are just not as cool as you used to be. But those transitions wound us, but they're real, and we need to adjust. So how do you dial in positive relationships outside the home for your kids? There's a couple of things. First, find spiritual role models. Drew's talked a few weeks ago about the fact that each of our 3 kids have had people in this church. I look out in this crowd and I see some of you that you have poured so much into my kids, and I'm so grateful. And they're still in touch with these people because they have relationship with them. They've been good listeners to them. They've been encouragers. Our kids also have found mentors and encouragers now that they've gone on to other places. They live out of state, they live away, they're at college. They've found people that can pour into them spiritually. Kids need these role models. One area that we as a church can partner with you and can help with this, though, is if you will get your kids involved in our youth ministry. We have an amazing youth staff. And then there's so many of you, again, in this room, as I look out and see you, there's so many that volunteer as youth coaches and as small group leaders. I want to tell you that a couple of months ago, I don't know what came over me. I guess it was just God speaking through me, but I said to Nate Wake, our junior high pastor, I said, I would like to volunteer on Wednesday nights. I don't know why I said that, but I did. So now on Wednesday nights, I'm a small group leader for 6th grade girls. And let me just say, wow. I have some of your girls in my group, and they like to talk. And they like to talk about you, so I'm finding out all kinds of things. And even though I'm old now, and I'm a little bit removed from that 6th grade life, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't change it. The fact that I get the opportunity to help be a mentor for these girls is huge for my life, and I really hope that at some point it's huge for theirs too. Another group that can't be overlooked are grandparents. Grandparents are often a forgotten source of spiritual support because they have extra time, many of them, and they're often willing to make those huge sacrifices for your kids. Just out of curiosity, how many of you owe some of your personal success or your spiritual heritage to a grandparent? Look across the room. That influence is huge. Proverbs 17:6 says, grandchildren are the crowning glory of the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. How many of you even knew that that was in the Bible? Grandparents can leave a legacy for your kids. I had 2 amazing grandmothers in my life. One of them, she taught me so much about things in the home. We cooked together, we did gardening, we did canning, we did quilting. I learned those things from her. My other grandmother was a pastor's wife. And I grew up watching her in that role, not knowing that she was helping to prepare me for the life that I now live. And so I'm grateful for that. And as you may or may not know, Drew and I are fairly new grandparents. And I know that you're thinking that we couldn't possibly be old enough for that. I'm sure that's what you're thinking. But our daughter Hannah married her husband Brandon last year. And not only did we gain a son-in-law that we love and are incredibly thankful for, we gained 3 beautiful granddaughters. This is Austin and Natalie and Layla, and we love them so much, and we're just so grateful to be their grandparents. We're having a blast with that. And I would also like to show you the first picture of our newest grandbaby, because Hannah and Brandon have just told us that she's expecting, and we might just be just a little bit excited, just a little bit. So this baby's coming the end of September, and we just couldn't be more thrilled. But our desire, because we're their grandparents, our desire is to be influences in their lives, to be spiritual mentors for them, whether or not we come into their lives when they're babies or when they're a little older, like Layla, Natalie, and Austin. It doesn't change that mindset for us. We cherish them and the time that we have for them. You grandparents can be influencers. Let's talk about babysitters. And you may laugh about that, but babysitters are not just caregivers. They can be role models spiritually and socially. Drew and I were very strategic with babysitters early on. When Hannah was little, our dear friend Diana Bennis was her babysitter. And Diana is a godly woman. She's full of joy, and she's full of love for our child. When we moved to Texas, our boys instantly were drawn to a young man named Matt Lambro. Matt had enormous impact in their lives. He was the cool teenager that made things fun for them, but he would also talk about Jesus with them. And he's now our son Landon's brother-in-law. Landon married Matt's sister Mackenzie, and so you never know the impact that babysitter could have. But be serious when you're thinking about babysitters. If you're interested, call our youth office, and we can recommend some awesome Compass students that would have a great impact on your kids. I just want to finish by saying that Drew and I will be married 32 years on June 27th, and we have been parenting for 29 of those years. But for nearly 3 decades, God has brought us quality spiritual mentors for our children, not because we're special, but because we were intentional, and not because they found us, but because we found them. I want to challenge you to pray about that. Ask God to put someone of spiritual influence in your kid's path, and you're never going to regret it.
So we got to wrap this up because my wife is a little long-winded. But is there someone, you have to ask yourself this question, is there someone in my child's life that I need to dial in? Is there a mentor? Is there a grandparent? Is there a godly friend? Look at it again. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. When we allow our kids to hang out with foolish people, we're putting them in harm's way. I would imagine everyone in this room can relate to this principle. There are people in the room. You have found yourself in a relationship with people who have anger issues. Initially, they showed you their soft side, but then the real person came out, and it was pretty ugly. You have found yourself in relationships with people who have financial problems, and you thought they were free with their money, and you saw them as generous, but now their debt is affecting you. You have relationships with people who have abusive tendencies. Everything was great at first, then it turned dark, and there came moments of verbal abuse, even physical abuse. They're a different person than you thought. You have relationships with people who have authenticity issues, and you thought them to be a genuine Christian, and they talk the walk, but they talk the talk, but walking the walk has become a different story. Or maybe there's addiction, and you weren't aware of it, and now it's become your problem. Friendships don't always follow a natural progression, and many times the progression is a downward spiral. Paul says, bad company corrupts good character. And it's true. There's a reason that great kids who make great grades all of a sudden turn apathetic, rebellious, and different. It's almost always a result of a poor relationship outside the home. Bad company does corrupt good character. We always tried to teach our kids teachable moments when they were students, when they were in high school. And we talked about, first of all, the importance of identifying people who make good daytime friends, but maybe not so good nighttime friends. So we don't want to judge our friends, but we want to just evaluate them. And so we might say to our kids over time, hey, why don't you go hang out with Josh? He seems like a really great kid. And maybe Lana would say, I've learned Josh is a good daytime friend, maybe not a great nighttime friend. So we kind of had that code. We also adopted the home turf policy. We tried to create a place for teens to come to our house that was safe. And so we always tried to, have like a man cave or a rec room, or if you have a pool, that's always a good drawing card. Or maybe we'd put together I had fire pits in our backyard. I don't think they were ever even legal, but we had them. We'd, roast marshmallows and stuff and have that. We had a full house most of the time, and privacy was scarce. It was like a 757 was flying through that place. But I've always leaned on a proverb. It says this: better a few loud, sleepless nights under my own roof than not knowing where my teenager is or who they are with. I just want to clarify, that's not in the Bible, but it's still a proverb. Let me tell you, the easiest way for Satan to introduce himself to your child is through a friend. Through a friend. Remember, he's a deceiver, and he can give off the image of good, and he can do it through other people, through friends. Don't be foolish in thinking you have control over this. Looks can be deceiving. Kids are smart. Texas kids are really smart. A sweet-spirited young woman who appears polite might turn out to be poison for your son. A handsome young gentleman who looks you in the eye and says, yes, sir, could be a big mistake for your daughter. Check them out, ask around, talk to teachers and other parents, get the skinny on your kids' friends, ask questions and get a general sense as to who they are. I'm not saying judge them or go on a witch hunt, but the extra effort is worth it. And if your kids question you, you say, you are priceless to me. And I love you so much that I care enough to see who you're spending time with. My friend Dave Stone wrote a book called Raising Your Kids to Love the Lord. And he says, if I could pray for one thing for my kids, it wouldn't be for intelligence, beauty, or athleticism. It wouldn't be for an easy life or a good education or a profitable job. If I could pray for only one thing, it would be that God would surround them with friends who love the Lord. So here's the question. Is there someone in my child's life that I need to dial out? Do I need to be more intentional? Should I be less passive about a relationship that my kid has with someone outside my home? Be intentional about this and be smart. Okay, we're wrapping up this series, and here's just a few reminders. Raise your kids to be relationally rich, not experience rich. It's okay to have experiences. Experiences are great. It's awesome. But be relationally rich more than anything. Discipline your kids early and often. Teach the value of the word no. Don't use size and position once they become teenagers. It's not going to help. It's not going to be effective. Don't use size and position. You use your relationship equity at that point. Remember that a relationship with God is the most important thing in your life, in the life of your student, in the life of your child, in your life. In fact, your kid can't make the next step spiritually until you take the first step. And so today, as everyone leaves, maybe some of you need to stay in the room and come down and talk to one of our pastors at these kiosks to my right and to my left. And most of all, remember that your relationship with your kids today will determine the weight of your influence tomorrow. Listen, I don't tell you this to say that if you do all these things, your kids will never make mistakes. Not at all. I'm not saying they'll never drift. In fact, If I've learned anything over the last 30 years being a father, I've learned that everyone drifts at one time or another, including me. But you drive a relational stake so deep that when they do drift, they can look back to a relational anchor and know that there's a loving God who wants and covets a relationship with them, that there are loving parents who long to be close, and that there are spiritual mentors to talk to when needed. Let me pray over you. God, we love you. Just pray that you would help all of us to become better parents. Give us the wisdom and the strength and the courage to become great, godly parents, Father. And we pray, God, that you would bless our kids today as we speak. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Love you guys.